Good morning, colleagues and members of the press. Welcome to the PIOJ quarterly press briefing. Thank you for being patient with us through the slight delay, but we are ready to go. We're just going to go through some quick reminders. The meeting, you'll be muted throughout until the discussion section. At that time, if you wish to ask a question, we ask that you use the raise hand feature. Aside from that, if you're listening on Facebook, you can type in the chat. Aside from that, you can look in the chat section and we will shortly be putting in a telephone number that you can text or WhatsApp your questions, and we'll also be putting in an email address. If you do not have to use your video feature, we ask that you turn it off so that we can have a smooth internet experience without any buffering. The meeting will be recorded as soon as the moderator begins speaking. Mrs. Blake Hall, thank you again, and I hand over to the moderator.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica for our quarterly press briefing. Today, our Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will present on the October to December 2020 quarter. He is supported by Mr. James Stewart, the Senior Director from the Economic Planning and Research Division. At the end of the presentation, we will take your questions. DG.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on preliminary information available from the major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with developments in all modern economies globally, where it is the common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figures are released. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the third month following the quarter being reviewed. The release of the preliminary outturn information is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, to inform critical planning and policy-related decisions. I would also like to reiterate that trends have shown that the gap between our initial estimate and the subsequent estimate produced by Statin is more likely to be larger in times of extraordinary shocks, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. That is, the variation between the PIOJ's estimate and Statin's subsequent estimate is likely to be outside the usual band, both at the industry level as well as the overall growth outturn. Statin's data on GDP reflects and represents the official data on economic performance, and all preliminary estimates are updated to reflect the data provided by Statin. So, for example, for the preliminary estimate presented today, the actual data will be released by Statin at the end of March 2021, at which time all previous estimates for this review period will be updated. Today, we are reporting an estimated real value added contraction of 9.4% for the October to December 2020 quarter, relative to the corresponding quarter of 2019. The estimated outturn for the review quarter continued to reflect the negative impact of 1, the prevalence of COVID-19 cases globally and locally, which has negatively impacted economic activities through reduced demand and a slowing in the pace of reopening. There were renewed restrictions and logistical challenges of COVID-19 vaccination programs in some economies. 2, the implementation of measures to manage the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, which began impacting the island in March 2020. 3, weakened business and consumer confidence associated with uncertainties regarding the duration and impact of the pandemic. And 4, weakened demand associated with lower disposable income due to job losses and reduced work hours. Approximately 92,600 fewer persons were employed in October 2020 relative to October 2019. However, a further decline was tempered by an uptick in construction activities as well as increased output from the bauxite and alumina industry against the background of production challenges and the cessation of the impact of the Gisco Alpart refinery's closure, as there was no production by that refinery in the corresponding quarter of 2019. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry contracted by an estimated 0.6%, reflecting declines in 2 of the 4 industries, namely agriculture and manufacturing. Agriculture. The agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry contracted by an estimated 6.1% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2019. This performance largely reflected the impact of 1, heavy rainfall at the start of the quarter, which led to the damage of crops as a result of flooding, and as well as 2, reduced demand associated with the fallout in visitor arrivals due to COVID-19 and associated restrictions. During the review quarter, other agricultural crops fell by 8.5%, reflecting lower production in 6 of the 9 crop groups. The most significant contractions were recorded for condiments, down 37%, legumes, down 27.2%, fruits, down 19.2%, and vegetables, down 14.4%. A lower level of output was recorded for the traditional export crop sub-industry, which declined by 5.6%, largely due to reduced production of banana, coffee, and cocoa, which outweighed a 24.1% increase in sugarcane production. Animal farming was estimated to have recorded growth due to a 6.7% increase in broiler meat production and a 21.4% increase in egg production. Associated with the decline in output was a 5% contraction in hectares reaped, with declines recorded in 9 parishes. St. Elizabeth continued to account for the largest share of land under cultivation, accounting for 24.3% of total hectares. There were reduced output of domestic crops from all parishes except Trelawney and St. Anne. Reduced output was recorded in major agricultural producing parishes such as St. Elizabeth, down 21.4%, Manchester, down 9.9%, and Clarendon, down 4.9%. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying is estimated to have grown by 6%, largely reflecting increased alumina and crude bauxite production. This was the first increase following 5 consecutive quarters of contraction, which were impacted by the closure of the Gisco Alpart alumina plant. Alumina production increased by 6.9% due to higher production at the 2 operating alumina refineries, which were both impacted by technical issues in the corresponding quarter of 2019, which curtailed output. Consequently, the alumina capacity utilization rate increased to 40.7% from 38% in the corresponding quarter of 2019. Crude bauxite production grew by 4.2% due to increased demand. Consequently, the average bauxite capacity utilization rate increased by 2.4 percentage points to 60.1%. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry was estimated to have decreased by 3.4%, reflecting a decline in the other manufacturing sub-industry, as the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry was estimated to have grown. The other manufacturing sub-industry was estimated to have contracted, reflecting lower output for petroleum products. The reduction in the petroleum products category reflected downturns in the output of liquid petroleum gas, down 50.3%, fuel oil, down 29.3%, and turbo fuel, down 52.4%. The performance in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry was due to estimated increases in output of poultry meat, up 6.1%, animal feeds, up 4.8%, cornmeal, up 46.5%, sugar, up 37.8%, and bakery products, up 9%. The beverages and tobacco component was supported by an increase in the production of rum and alcohol, up 13.5%, and carbonated beverages, up 10.8%. Construction. Real value added for construction grew by 6.2%, reflecting an estimated increase in the other construction component. The growth in the other construction component was due to increased capital expenditure on civil engineering activities by the National Works Agency, up 19.1% to $3.8 billion due to expenditure on the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, and the Urban Development Corporation, up 51.1% to $405.2 million. The performance of the building construction component was influenced by a downturn in housing starts and the value of mortgages dispersed by the NHT, down 80.6% and 12.3% respectively. Activities during the quarter were supported by work in progress on previously started developments. With respect to the non-residential category, the main drivers included the construction and renovation of commercial buildings. Developments in the services industry. The services industry contracted by 11.5%, reflecting lower real value added in all industries, except for producers of government services, which grew by 0.1%. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry recorded a contraction of 9.2% in real value added, reflecting decreases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption fell by 10.7%, reflecting reduced consumption in all categories. Residential, down 0.1%. General service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere, down 15.4%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kilovolt ampere but less than 500 kilovolt ampere, down 12.8%. Large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, down 12.2%. And street lighting and other, down 37%. Largest power, that's single locations that have a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was down 25.1%. Lower sales were recorded in all parishes except St. Elizabeth, which increased by 1.1%. The parishes with the largest declines were Trelawney, down 22.1%, and St. James, down 19.4%. The declines in these parishes were partly attributed to the fallout in the tourism industry. Water consumption declined by 3.2% to 20,467 megaliters. Decreased consumption was recorded for the Western Division, down 12.4%, which outweighed a 1.8% increase in the Eastern Division. Lower consumption in the Western Division was led by the parishes of Hanover, down 27.5%, Trelawney, down 16.8%, St. James, down 14.3%, and St. Anne, down 11%, reflecting reduced demand from tourism. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication fell by 15.2% due to an estimated contraction in the transport and storage sub-industry, which outweighed an estimated increase in the communication sub-industry. The overall downturn in the industry was due to a decline in the air transport component, largely reflecting decreased passenger movement, down 73%, due to departures, down 74.4%, and arrivals, down 71.2%, and a downturn in the maritime transport component, as a result of a 12.3% decline in the total cargo volume handled at the island seaports. Cargo volume handled at the heavier weighted Port of Kingston fell by 17.6%. Finance and insurance services. The finance and insurance services industry registered a decline of 5% during the quarter, reflecting the impact of one, reduced profitability of deposit-taking institutions, reflecting a fall in economic activities, employment, and lower levels of business and consumer confidence. Two, reduced profitability at investment management firms. And three, a decline in the life insurance and general insurance sectors. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry declined by 10.4% due to an estimated contraction in related goods producing industries, worsened consumer and business confidence, and lower levels of employment. The lower value added was tempered by real increases of 27.6% in remittance inflows for October to November 2020, and a 0.4% increase in the value of automated business machines, ABM, and point-of-sale transactions. Lower sales were recorded for 7 of the 8 goods categories, led by minerals, fuels, lubricants, and petroleum products, down 28.6%, motor vehicles, auto repairs and accessories, down 24.4%, and textiles, clothing, shoes, and jewelry, down 23.6%. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry, which captures the majority of tourism-related activities, is estimated to have contracted by 52.8%. This was influenced by an estimated decrease in foreign national arrivals, down 74% to 156,419 persons. Total stopover arrivals decreased by 72% to 184,683 persons. There were no cruise passenger arrivals. Total visitor expenditure fell by 61.9% to US $355.4 million. GdP performance for January to December 2020. For calendar year 2020, real GDP is estimated to have fallen by 10.2%. This was the first year of contraction following 7 consecutive years of GDP growth. The downturn in economic activity was attributed to the global spread of COVID-19 and the associated measures implemented to mitigate its transmission. Specifically, in Jamaica's case, the shock brought on by the pandemic resulted in lower output and employment levels, as well as reductions in household consumption, business investment, exports, and government revenues. For 2020, the goods producing industry was estimated to have contracted by 4.7%, while the services industry contracted by 11.3%. All industries, with the exception of producers of government services, declined. The sharpest contractions were recorded in industries associated with travel and tourism, as well as the mining and quarrying industry, namely hotels and restaurants, down 53.5%, other services, down 23.4%, transport, storage, and communication, down 13.5%, and mining and quarrying, down 21.7%. The decline recorded by the mining and quarrying industry reflected the continued closure of the Gisco alumina refinery for the entire year compared with 2019 when the refinery was open for 3 quarters. Additionally, the implementation of COVID-19 restrictions, which included the closure of borders to air travel globally, resulted in the relatively significant fall in tourism-related industries. The employment update. Regarding the employment update, our sister agency, Statin, has already provided an update on the labor force survey. As such, we will not present a detailed report on this area. The highlights, however, are that for the month of October 2020, the unemployment rate was 10.7%. This was 3.5 percentage points higher than the rate recorded in October 2019. The higher unemployment rate reflected increased rates for both females, up 4.4 percentage points to 13%, and males, up 2.7 percentage points to 8.6%. The employed labor force contracted by 92,600 persons to 1,155,800 persons relative to October 2019. The employed labor force by industry group as at October 2020 revealed that 11 of the 15 industry groups recorded lower employment levels. Among these were arts, entertainment, recreation, and other services, down 36,900 persons, accommodation and food service activities, down 23,400 persons, wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles, down 15,800 persons, and education, human health, and social work activities, down 10,000 persons. The short-term economic outlook, January to March 2021. The short-term prospects for the Jamaican economy are challenging, based on, 1, an uptick in the COVID-19 positivity rate in the local economy, and the increased possibility for the extension of current restrictions and the implementation of additional restrictions during the quarter. 2, the implementation of new COVID-19 restrictions in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners in Europe and North America, which will dampen external demand for key goods and services, for example, tourism services. The hotels and restaurants, other services, and transport, storage, and communication industries are expected to contract during the January to March 2021 quarter. Preliminary data indicate that there was an 82.4% contraction in airport arrivals in January 2021. 3, slower than expected pickup in the global economy, especially in the travel industry, which will also have implications for the demand of Jamaican goods and services. 4, lower output in agriculture due to the fallout in demand associated with the downturn in the hotels and restaurants industry. Additionally, the industry may be impacted by the delayed planting of crops stemming from heavy rainfall and flooding during late 2020. 5, a general downturn in demand and output in the short term, reflecting the impact of increased unemployment levels, reduced business and consumer confidence levels, and reduced operating hours for some businesses due to curfew restrictions. In light of the above-mentioned factors, we expect real GDP for the January to March 2021 quarter to contract within the range of 7% to 9%. If this forecast is realized, it would represent the smallest rate of quarterly contraction for fiscal year 2021, and may be indicative of a gradual return to normalcy in economic activities relative to the preceding quarters. Real GDP for fiscal year 2020-2021 is projected to contract within the range of 10.5% to 12.5%. With regard to Vision 2030, Jamaica, the National Development Plan. Before I provide an update on the country's development results, let me use this opportunity to remind you how these are measured under Vision 2030 Jamaica, the National Development Plan, NDP. Each medium-term socio-economic policy framework, or MTF, the central tenet of the implementation framework of Vision 2030 Jamaica, includes the national outcome indicators as well as relevant targets covering a 3-year period. The priority strategies and actions implemented under the MTF are intended to promote the achievement of the targets. Under the current MTF, which covers the period spanning fiscal year 2018 to 2019 to fiscal year 2020 to 2021, 75 indicators are being used to measure the state of the country's development progress along the economic, social, environmental, and governance spheres of development. Measurement of the national development results is against defined targets for 2018 and 2021 and a baseline year of 2007, based on latest available data. Therefore, for data available up to and including 2018, measurement is against the 2018 target, and for the 2019 data, measurement is against the 2021 target. Fiscal year 2019 to 2020 marked 11 years of implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica, the National Development Plan, through successive medium-term frameworks. This assessment of the national development results takes place at the midpoint of the implementation period of MTF 2018 to 2021, that is fiscal year 2019 to 2020. Based on the National Outcome Indicator and Target Framework, the country's development progress under successive medium-term frameworks, 2009 to 2012, 2012 to 2015, 2015 to 2018, and 2018 to 2021, has been mixed. Jamaica has experienced notable development gains across all 4 goals of Vision 2030 Jamaica. Some of the advances made over the period include human capital development, macroeconomic stability, reduction in unemployment, increases in the use of non-fossil fuel-based energy, such as alternatives and renewables, governance, particularly in government effectiveness, economic growth in some industry structures, particularly tourism, manufacturing, and finance and insurance services, and infrastructural development and housing quality. Some of the areas of concern include lower levels of economic growth, increase in the rate of chronic non-communicable diseases, NCDs, a fall in environmental sustainability, and inadequate levels of competitiveness and earnings in key economic sectors. While Jamaica's score on the Ease of Doing Business Index has improved, the country's rank has not equally improved. And while Jamaica has maintained its position in the second-tier high human development category of the Human Development Index, HDI, recorded gradual increases over the period of plan implementation, and maintained a score of 0.734 for 2017 to 2019, the country lost an average of 2 points in its ranking for the period 2014 to 2019. A summary of the progress across the 75 indicators shows that approximately 62.7% have shown improvement over the baseline year of 2007, based on data up to December 2019, while approximately 33.3% showed no improvement or worsened relative to the baseline year of 2007. This can be broken down as follows. 36% of the Vision 2030 Jamaica targets were met or exceeded. 26.7% of indicators showed some improvement over the baseline year 2007 towards meeting the targets. 33.3% of the indicators showed no improvement or worsened, and 4% of the indicators could not be compared in this way due to lack of agreed targets for the relevant period. These results will continue to play a key role in the pursuit of strategic priorities under Vision 2030 Jamaica and inform the development of the medium-term framework 2021 to 2024. The ongoing implementation of successive 3-year MTFs aim to consolidate the developmental gains made in the previous MTFs and strengthen the foundations for achieving the country's long-term development results, taking into account the many opportunities that surround us, the current developmental challenges we are confronted with, and the global context. The PIOJ will continue to lead the coordination of the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica, including monitoring and evaluation, M&E, to identify progress towards planned development outcomes and to assess the strengths and gaps in the approach and priorities we are pursuing to advance the achievement of Vision 2030 Jamaica and report these to the general public. So in summary, the Jamaican economy is estimated to have contracted by 9.4% for the October to December 2020 quarter, based on early indicators. This brings real GDP outturn for the calendar year 2020 to negative 10.2%, representing the first annual contraction since 2012. This outturn is mainly due to the negative effects associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and measures implemented to contain its spread. For fiscal year 2020-2021, the economy is projected to contract within a range of 10.5% to 12.5%, reflecting expected declines in all quarters. The economy is expected to grow during fiscal year 2021-2022 as the demand and output for goods and services increases over their fiscal year 2020-21 levels. An increase in the number of tourist arrivals, as well as a gradual return to normalcy given the sharp decline in economic activity in fiscal year 2020-2021, will be the main drivers of the expansion. The current projection is that the economy will grow within the range of 4% to 8%, with all industries forecasted to record growth. It should be noted that these projections are fluid, given the uncertainties which currently prevail regarding the pandemic, but there are some positive signs which provide optimism. These include, 1, measures implemented locally to manage the spread of the virus, which has allowed for the gradual resumption of economic activities. Indications are that economic activities have gradually strengthened in each successive quarter since June 2020. 2, the aggressive vaccination program currently underway globally, and which is to commence locally by the last quarter of fiscal year 2020-2021. The expectation is that with increasing numbers being vaccinated globally, there will be a reduction in global positivity rates, which will provide greater confidence for economies to allow for the gradual removal of restrictions currently in place. 3, the cycling out of the impact of the closure of the Gisco Alpart refinery, which was closed in September 2019. Since the October to December 2019 quarter, this industry placed a drag on overall growth performance. However, the growth outturn recorded for October to December 2020 is expected to continue throughout the upcoming fiscal year, given that prevailing demand conditions remain or improve. Anticipated strong growth in industries associated with travel and tourism as the rollout of vaccination programs globally and locally is expected to facilitate growth in the hotels and restaurants, other services, particularly in the areas of entertainment and attractions, and the transport, storage, and communication industries. It should be noted, however, that while the overall output level for fiscal year 2021-2022 is projected to be higher than in fiscal year 2020-2021, it will still be lower than the pre-COVID-19 output level as at fiscal year 2018-2019. The current projection is that Jamaica will return to its pre-COVID-19 level of output in 3 years, that is by fiscal year 2023-2024. Finally, Jamaica is facing unprecedented and very challenging times in all spheres of life, brought about by the global pandemic currently impacting us. Overcoming these challenges, particularly as a small island developing state, will demand the efforts of all of us. Let us guard against compliance fatigue and continue to demonstrate responsible behavior in physical distancing, mask wearing, and sanitization. Overcoming these challenges, we'll continue to dialogue and collaborate as we sustain the commitment to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Let me commend the team, the hardworking team here at the PIOJ. In challenging circumstances, as with so many others, we continue to produce very high quality work, and I want to thank them for their continued efforts. May God continue to bless Jamaica. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. I understand that we lost speed for a short while at the beginning of the presentation, but the entire presentation will be uploaded so you can view from the Facebook and the YouTube pages. We will now take any questions. We will now take your questions. Remember to use the raise hand feature and you will be identified. Once you have been identified, please state your name and the organization you're representing.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Henry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Laidley, TVJ News. I wonder, Dr. Henry, if you could provide an explanation as to why the outturn given by PIOJ would be so much different from that would have been reported by Stacking later. And I say this in the context of, I imagine that you're using the same data. So just an explanation and to clarify for me why that is.
All right, thank you, Andrew, for the question. And just to remind that we, as you say, each quarter, so this is the December quarter we're reporting on, we would provide a forecast of the quarter's performance. And that comes some 6 weeks following the end of the quarter. So this is now just around mid to the end of February, sometime after December, some 6 weeks. And then in 3 months, Statin will come with the actual measurement. So Statin doesn't do forecast, they will give the actual measurement of economic performance while we are using models to forecast what it would be. And if you look at the numbers, our estimate, what we forecast is in a very close band to Statin's actual outturn. So in one point we said it would be 18.3% and it turned out at 18.1. In another, in terms of the actual versus the forecast, in another time we would say, just in those few percentage points. So in a very close band, which the record would show over a long period of time that our forecasts have been very robust, very, very strong, very accurate. And so we invite you to look at those numbers. There was a misreporting in one sense in the media where they reported the wrong quarter, saying that there was some disparity between the actual outturn and what we had projected, but it was in fact just 18.3 versus 18.1. But I think they recorded the wrong quarter, and they apologized for that after. So our estimates are very robust, and a lot of work goes into that. But let me ask James, who is the head, James Stewart, heads our economic planning division, if he wants to add anything.
Thank you, DG. I think you have said it all, DG. The essential difference is that we use early numbers, we use early indicators based on whatever number we can solicit at the time of reporting, as well as the models to do forecasting. So you have said it all, hence the difference. Whereas Statin actually measures output based on the extensive database that they would have collected.
Thank you, DG. Any other questions?
Yes. Good morning, DG.
Good morning. Good morning. Where?
Neville Graham from the Gleaner.
Right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to post questions, DG. Your report of forecasting for the next looking forward does not paint a very rosy picture of economic growth or real GDP. Could you just take us back over that a little and to say what are your recommendations in light of this week forecast?
All right, so thank you, Neville. Morning, and thanks for the question. So we said some things. We said that as we look over the last fiscal year, this ending fiscal year 2020 to 2021, we noticed that in the first quarter of fiscal year, the June quarter, we saw a relatively large decline in economic performance, and then a smaller decline in the September quarter, and then now an even smaller decline in the December quarter, and you hear the projection for an even smaller decline for the March. So what you're seeing, Neville, is a a decline in the rate of contraction, which we say is indicative now of, we are hoping, some return to pick up in the economy, return to normalcy, and pick up in economic activity. Now, because of what we are seeing globally, where the overall theme is still one of uncertainty, that a number of countries have had to reimpose restrictive measures, you're seeing that playing out in a global landscape. We are still in a pandemic, and so while we are still looking forward, and you're still seeing those challenges, we are saying that the negative impact is dissipating. We are anticipating. The risk, of course, is that if we have to now reintroduce or extend restrictive measures, because if the numbers would climb, if there's a surge and continued spread, then we'd have to, like many other economies, have to get back into more restriction. But we are hoping that as we are seeing the numbers in terms of the rate of impact declining, then that is really optimistic looking forward. We are saying that, you're seeing resumption of activities in the mining sector, mining and quarrying, which had nothing to do really with the pandemic itself, because they had closed for retooling and maintenance activities, and now we are seeing a resumption there. We are thinking, because of vaccines being rolled out now globally and soon to be locally, that we expect that to have a mitigating impact in terms of the spread and should facilitate more reopening and resumption of activities. So it's not as negative as you would say, but it's a realistic picture that we are saying. But if you look at the trend, if you were to think of a trend line, Neville, then you're seeing a declining trend of negative impact, which suggesting a return to more optimism and more growth going forward. So for this year, we are actually saying we should have between 4% and 8% growth in terms of pickup, but we would not be at the pre-COVID levels of economic activity, but we are gradually hoping to work our way there. To answer your last question, what would it take? It would mean that we must still be responsible in how we continue to respond. All of us shared responsibility in managing the spread of this pandemic. We can't, what we call compliance fatigue, we can't get tired in doing the right thing to be careful to maintain physical distancing, to be careful to maintain the wearing of masks and the frequent hand washing, etc. We have to keep this up, especially now. And so we are calling, and we are joining the call from all sectors just for that shared responsible behavior. And I think we are a resilient people, and we can do it, and we just have to continue to be focused.
Thanks,
Just
DG.
a follow-up, if I may. DG?
Yes.
The 4% to 8% projection is coming from a low base. Understandably, we should be positive there.
Yes.
But the drastic declines in consumption, say electricity, cement, you outlined them earlier on, does not bode well for that restart that you're hoping for. So, can I hear from you some sort of projection as to the timeline for this sort of recovery, given all the optimistic measures that you've posited?
All right. So again, Neville, we said that we anticipate the pickup. So construction already, we've seen some positive movement there in the construction sector. Because of the nature of hotels and restaurants, we are saying we anticipate pickup there, continued pickup because of the vaccination programs being rolled out globally and a resumption in travel-related activities. We're anticipating that. We said, Neville, that we anticipate, while we speak of the growth of 4 to 8% for this coming fiscal year, we said that we would expect a resumption, a return to pre-COVID levels of economic activity and growth in 3 years' time, by 2023, 2024. So again, it's a optimism, and we give a basis for the optimism, but we are careful to outline the potential downside risk that if we were to have a return to based on the spread of the virus or return to more restrictive conditions both locally and globally, those will represent downside, right? We said agriculture was doing well, but again, because of the vulnerability of the sector, we saw a negative hit through heavy rainfall and the flooding that damaged crops. Again, agriculture was showing some resilience to the COVID-19, where we're seeing local produce finding its way to local markets. But again, that was hit by the flood conditions, the heavy rainfall. So as you examine the numbers and the conditions closely, which we've outlined here, we have given reason for the optimism. But again, the human factor of responsible behavior is incumbent on all of us.
Thanks very much, sir.
Let me ask James Stewart just to add.
Mr. Graham, just referring back to your question in terms of a specific timeline for resumption of growth, we have forecasted this to commence as at the April to June 2021 quarter. All industries are expected to grow during that period, given the low base, as you pointed to, and this is expected to continue throughout the year. With all quarters, we are seeing growth for fiscal year 2021-22.
I think we have come to the end. There are no more questions. I want to thank you for joining us. As I had indicated earlier, the entire presentation will be available through our Facebook and YouTube platforms. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send or to call us. Join us for the next press briefing when we report on the January to March 2021 quarter in May. Have a good day and be safe.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Thank you, James. Well done.